Hi, welcome back. Today I'm talking about 3 simple stretches to help with knee pain. So, as many of you know, I like to walk, I like to run. I don't really like strength training, but I do it. I love to stretch. And so every once in a while when I'm running, I get a twinge in knee pain. And it usually happens when I first start back to running after having not done it for a little while. And so that's a good reason to not get out of shape, right? Well, I go in waves. Depending on the season of life that I'm in, I may or may not want to be running. So I'll just keep up with my walking, but eventually I get back to the time frame that I want to run. And so in order to keep my knee feeling good, and it's usually my right knee, sometimes my left knee, usually my right. But to keep my knee feeling good, I do strength training regularly. And I already did a video about the 3 simple exercises, strength exercises that I do for my knee. So you guys can check out that video here. And so I do that. I also keep my knee feeling happy by doing 3 simple stretches regularly. I stretch after strength training, I stretch after walking, I stretch after running, I stretch every day, especially if something feels tight, I stretch more. One thing I don't do is only stretch. So I can't emphasize that enough. Only stretching won't help your pain. It needs to be in combination with cardiovascular training, strength training, endurance training, and you add in the stretching. So talking about my 3 favorite stretches. So the quad stretch, the hamstring stretch, and the hip flexor stretch. So I've always liked the quad stretch. I remember going back to my soccer days when I was younger, and we'd be standing in a circle, and you'd pair up with somebody and you'd stand, you'd hold on to her shoulder, she'd hold on to your shoulder, and you each grabbed your own foot and bent your knee behind you and held the stretch for 30 seconds, balancing between using each other for balance. So this stretch helps knee pain because that muscle goes directly through the knee. The kneecap sits in the quad muscle. And so you want to keep that muscle flexible, pliable, movable to help keep your knees happy. The next one I like to do is the hamstring stretch. So I never really thought that I needed to do the hamstring stretch growing up because I was a gymnast and I was super flexible. I was doing splits and, looking back on it, that was me stretching my hamstrings and me stretching my hip flexors. I'll talk about that next. But, in gym class, you do that sit and reach test, and it was laughable when I got up to it. I would reach way beyond whatever the gym teacher's little testing marker was. And so it was laughable. It's like, Allie, why are you even doing this? So, but as I got older and I wasn't doing splits as often or ever, I don't really do them anymore, I really noticed I need to stretch out my hamstrings. The hamstring stretch really helps with knee pain because not all knee pain is in the front. Some of it's in the back. So if you have a really tight knee in a bent position, stretching your hamstrings is going to straighten out your knee and loosen up the back of the knee so it isn't in that bent position and tight anymore. Bonus, stretching the hamstrings can also help the front of the knee because the added pressure from tight hamstrings can affect the front of the knee too. Okay, so finally, let's talk about the hip flexor stretch. So the hip flexor stretch, I actually didn't learn until I was a physical therapist. I had never really stretched my hip flexors, except looking back, I was just mentioning the hamstring stretch, I was mentioning doing splits, and that stretched out my hamstrings. It also stretched out my hip flexors. So I really didn't need to do any of it. But when I was a physical therapist, I learned this stretch because it really, really, really helped people who had hip pain, especially tightness in the front of their hips. So doing the kneeling hip flexor stretch really helped with that. The hip flexor stretch also helps with the knee because one of the quad muscles is actually also a hip flexor. So if the quad is tight, part of the hip flexor is going to be tight. So if you stretch out the hip flexor as well, it's going to transfer its flexibility through that muscle belly in the thigh and into the knee. And so you're going to be getting a big effect by loosening up the hip and loosening up the knee all at the same time. Okay, so to recap, my 3 favorite stretches for knee pain are the quad stretch, hamstring stretch, and hip flexor stretch. These stretches help keep the muscles around the knee flexible and pliable to be able to move comfortably. For more tips and tricks, continue following along.